I'm Rolene Marks, and I have one question for you. Is it just me, or has this week flown? Well, I guess time flies when you're having fun and also covering huge swathes of news. Nevertheless, before we head into the weekend, let's take a look at those top stories dominating the headlines here in Israel. And we always do it right here on the Israel Brief, brought to you by Leo the Lad. So let's talk about the big topic, the one that we were all waiting for, and that was President Herzog's historic speech to Congress. Now, the president follows in the footsteps of his late father, President Chaim Herzog, who addressed the same plenary on in 1987 on the 40th anniversary of Israel's independence. So the president entered to huge applause and a standing ovation, and the speech was really conciliatory. It was optimistic. It was a celebration of Israel in her 75th year, and it was actually a love letter, in my opinion, to the ties between Israel and the United States. Now, a word that has been used over the last couple of weeks by Prime Minister Netanyahu, by members of the Biden administration, and by President Herzog has been the word ironclad, and you could certainly see it and feel it in the room yesterday. So let's take a look at some of the high points. The president really struck the right chord. It was the perfect balance between optimism, celebration, remembering history, making it very personal, but also delivering some very pointed, well-phrased jabs and reiterations as well. The president touched on the diversity of Israel and had representatives in the room with him that really showed off Israel's diverse character. He also spoke a lot about democracy and the shared values of democracy and how important democracy is, and said that, Israelis will always argue amongst each other, especially now when we are having very painful, very difficult conversations around the proposed judicial overhauls. But one thing we always are is a family. He said something that really resonated with me. He said, democracy is in the DNA of Israel. And sure, DNA mutates, but it really is part of the fiber of our very being. He also made a point of taking a stab at those members of the squad that, permanently attack Israel and Israel's right to exist as the nation state of the Jewish people. He said, criticism is welcome, even though you don't necessarily have to take it. He says, but when it starts to become a questioning of Israel's legitimacy to exist, when it affects Jews in the United States or in Israel or around the world, that is anti-Semitism, and that was received amongst the many ovations with absolute thunderous applause. The president also paid tribute to Israelis being held captive by Hamas. He had Leah Golden, the mother of Hadar Golden, who fell in battle during Operation Protective Edge in 2014. He also lauded the United States for the role that the US has played throughout our history, not just from the founding of the Jewish state by President Truman, whose grandson was present in the room, but also the shared values, the helping to secure Israel. And though we might have some arguments from time to time, we always come back to each other, and our security and our strengths are mutually guaranteed. He also thanked the United States for their role in helping to foster the Abraham Accords, which has changed the landscape of the Middle East. And he reached out a hand to the Palestinians. He said, I'm here with an outstretched hand and an open heart. Israel wants to make peace with anybody near and far who is willing to make peace with us, but said that it cannot be built on the background of violence and terrorism. And here he made a pointed jab at Iran, saying that the only country in the world, a country that shares no borders with Israel, there's no fighting over any kind of infrastructure or resources, and we have absolutely no problem or quarrel with the Iranian people, but it is Iran that is sworn to the destruction of the state of Israel, and that we cannot allow a nuclear Iran. Now, the president's speech was received with applause after applause, ovation after ovation, and what has been quite amazing to see are the amounts of congressmen and women taking to social media, speaking about just what a privilege it was to be in the room yesterday to hear our esteemed, very elegant, humble and gracious president give his address to Congress. And just on a personal note to the members of the squad who elected to boycott, you're not progressive, you are regressive, because you missed an opportunity yesterday that was not only a masterclass in diplomacy and leadership, but you missed an opportunity to hear from Israel, from our head of state, the head of state who represents the Israeli people, who is not partisan. He is not elected on a partisan basis to represent the state of Israel. This is our face, the Israeli people's face to the world, and by snubbing him and by boycotting him, you have boycotted us, and you don't stand for peace. You are regressive and should be ashamed of yourselves. One day when you actually come to us with some kind of constructive solutions, perhaps we won't look at you as vehemently anti-Israel. My little rant over. Let's move on to other news, and His Majesty King Mohammed VI of Morocco has written to Prime Minister Netanyahu, extending a warm invitation to the Prime Minister for a state visit. The King has said that the recognition by Israel of Morocco's sovereignty over Western Sahara will only grow and strengthen ties between our two countries. Now, President Herzog has a very busy itinerary in the United States, and that included meeting with Vice President Kamala Harris. The two leaders launched a $70 million initiative to help combat the challenges brought forth by climate change, and this shared negotiated deal will see plans implemented to help deal with food insecurity and other issues in Africa and the Middle East. And finally, more great news between our two countries. Ambassadors Tom Nides from the United States and Ambassador Michael Herzog, Israel's ambassador to the United States, have signed a joint reciprocal agreement with regards to the visa waiver program. Now, what this sees is that American citizens will be able to travel to Israel and won't require a visa to enter, and Israelis, once we are accepted into the visa waiver program, will not need visas. And this also applies to dual citizens and those living in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. Now that brings me to the end of today's edition of the Israel Brief. Don't forget to check out our website at www.layoftheland.online. Check out all our different categories for our wonderful original content. Our Facebook page is at Lottel's site. If you haven't already friended us, please follow us. Like us, share our content. Our YouTube channel is at The Israel Brief. If you haven't joined our community, please click on that red subscribe button and invite your friends too as well. And we're on Twitter because, hey, who isn't? And you can find us at layoftheland.online. I'm Rolene Marks, wishing you all a wonderful, peaceful and restful weekend. Shabbat Shalom, Rosh Chodesh Tov, and I will see you again on Monday.